My belief is that there are certain musicians, because of their spiritual practice and their devotion, they can tune into what Pythagoras would call the music of the spheres. These are a series of frequencies and harmonics analogous to what the industrial psychologist Maslow would have called a state of self-actualization, or what certain spiritual teachers like Yogananda or etc. would call a state of self-realization. So in other words, these would be thoughts like love, compassion, forgiveness, empathy, these higher orders of thinking, which moves consciousness out of a linear and dualistic right, wrong, good, bad view of the world, and it moves consciousness into a holographic perspective of seeing how everything is lovingly and divinely interconnected.
Exploring the human journey.
Hi and welcome. I'm so glad you joined us today. What if you had a chance to change your world? What if you had a chance to be the change that you want to see in the world? Well, we recently have met Steve Robertson, and he is that change in the world. And we're going to have a fascinating conversation today. All of the things that you're doing is fascinating. You have such a robust amount of things that your human journey has led you down. So first of all, thanks for being here and welcome.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, we really appreciate you taking the time.
Of course.
The show, Exploring the Human Journey, is based upon, well, what is it that we're doing here? Who are we? Why are we here? We're connecting. We're consciousness. We're here part of the divine having this human experience. And then we make connections. Synchronicities happen. Dr. Sarah Larson says, you've got to talk to Steve. And then I look at all the things you're doing, music for world peace. You're talking about consciousness, vibration. There is so much. I can't wait to have this conversation. So Steve,
thanks.
Tell me a little bit about who you are, what you're doing, and the work you're involved with.
Well, presently I run an organization called Project Peace on Earth. I run another organization called Peace Song Awards and another organization called Support Veterans Now. My journey began at a very early age of 8. My father was an aerospace engineer. We moved from here in Inglewood, California, where I was born, to a little city in Friendswood, Texas, right outside of where Clear Lake City is, where NASA is. I actually grew up playing football with Andy Aldrin, Buzz Aldrin's son, midget league football, and I was quite obsessed with playing football and played it every moment I possibly could. And one day at recess, I was probably in the second grade or something, I was running the football. I wasn't especially big as I am now, but no one could tackle me this particular play, and I made it across our little goal line, which were basically 2 T-shirts thrown down on the ground.
Yeah.
So fun.
And I saw everything stop, like the Matrix stop. I saw everything 360, above, below, simultaneously. I had a sense that my mission was to help facilitate peace on the planet somehow. And the next thing I knew, I appeared to be multiple miles in the sky, free-falling like a parachutist into what I now know as Manger Square, Bethlehem, and I didn't know where that place was from Adam, and I never spoke to it about this experience with anyone. I don't want to end up in a rubber room.
Yeah.
So I just went on about my life. I raced, got out of high school. I got my professional motocross license. That's something I wanted to do. I raced dirt bikes professionally, and after I tried that for 3 years, I went on to college and graduated with a degree in business administration. And then I went on to become a sales engineer for some of the largest companies in the country that sold large-scale industrial process control computers at automated petrochemical plants and refineries and such. And during that process, I was engaged to a woman I was in love with, and had a job I thought was good and secure. And both dismissed me in a 24-hour period of time, and I was lost, completely lost. And through that process, I had a friend introduce me to a book called The Game of Life and How to Play It by Florence Shen, written in 1924.
Whoa.
Haven't heard of that one.
Yeah. I have heard of that book, but I've not read it. Tell me more.
Yeah, it was a great book, and I had been writing and listening to things inwardly most of my life. I took close to heart the in the city of Friendswood, Texas, was a Quaker established city, and they talked often about listening to the small, still voice within, and that small, still voice within spoke very loudly to me, a lot of times, and I listened very carefully. So, as I was growing up and racing, I wanted to become a top professional racer, and one day I asked, how to become a top professional racer. And these words came through very clearly, which has been, in essence, an axiom from which I've lived my life. And it says, limitations are bound only by the mind. The mind is bound only by our perception of those limitations. And in essence, I concluded from that, I said, if I can conceive of it, I can do it. And I, chose to live my life in that way as best I possibly
So you're getting that spiritual connection. You're hearing that.
Sure, yeah.
It's like from within, but it's from without.
That's exactly right.
That spiritual experience that I have felt, it's either in a deep meditation space or it's an ayahuasca ceremony.
Yeah.
And I've had that experience where you're hearing that connection. And so that really makes a lot of connection for me. One of the most profound messages I got was beliefs. And I said, well, what does beliefs mean? And ayahuasca said to me, what you believe becomes real for you.
Yeah. Well, I believe, very succinctly, I read the Bible through 3 times cover to cover before I was age 18, and I obviously didn't have the skill set to really understand, the sacred text in Sanskrit, which is in large part the context in which the Bible was written.
Yeah.
So it left me with a lot of questions growing up in Friendswood, Texas, a little Quaker established city. We didn't know who Quakers were, and then we found out about the Methodists and the Protestants and the Catholics and all these variations of Christianity, each of whom said, basically, we have the right way, and these Methodists, they're going to hell. And
you guys are okay or you're not, but we've got the real truth. Let me tell you.
We did that. We went from different church to different church, and each one of them had that same attitude.
We have the way, not a way, but the way.
The way.
Right. So that was a point of curiosity for most of my life, and of course it didn't bring in the Buddhists or the Hindus or anything else. That wasn't even part of the context of that conversation. But, as I grew up older, I said, look, and learned about, archaeology and etc. So, obviously when Jesus was alive, there people living on other continents of the planet. There weren't jet aircraft that transport people around. There weren't radio. There wasn't TV or anything else. So what was this? This is, just bad throw of the cosmic dice. You're on the wrong continent. You don't get to hear the word of Jesus, so you go to hell. I said, that is...
Heaven, hell. Is that all this is?
Doesn't compute.
That is dumb.
Yeah, it just doesn't compute.
So that God has to be way smarter than that. Yeah. And so this meltdown that I had at age 28 and the introduction of this book led me to the big question, which you're asking, what did the book in essence said? And it basically, I got halfway through the book and said, if you could do anything in the world and there were no limitations, what would you do? What would you love to do the most? And that was, I said to myself, when I got to that point, it was a bingo moment. I said, this is the most important question any human being is ever going to ask themselves. And I said, I am lost. I'm lost on every level. I lost the woman I thought I was in love with. I lost my job. I don't know where to go. And I remember that quote from the Bible, knock and the door will open, seeking you shall find. And I said to myself inwardly, I am going to knock on the door of heaven until my knuckles are bloody. I'm going to know the answer to this question. So I did, and I tried to meditate and best I could. And one day in a room, I heard very loudly music. And I said, music? I said, what on earth am I supposed to do with that? And in college, I had become a DJ, and I became, in essence, as a result of listening to the music of Mike Oldfield, who was, by the way, the very first artist signed by Virgin Records. He made Virgin Records. And you've heard his music before, and it's genius, totally genius. And when I heard his music, I've said, I've never heard anything like this before, and I became an ultimate audiophile on everything, as we would now call it, New Age music. Enya, Guitarro, Vangelis, and all of these musicians. And I was just totally crazy about this music. I just knew that there was something fundamentally different about it than anything else I'd ever heard my whole life, because my buddies and I, when we would travel 6 to 10 hours in a van to listen to races, all we were doing was listening to hard rock, and as best hard as we could get it. But when I heard this, it was rock, it was classical, it was jazz, it was avant-garde, it was many things, and I just said I was always looking since a little child for this music that gave you the goosebumps, and it did. So
The one that spoke to you, just
yeah,
really
it just spoke to
felt
my
it in
that
your
resonance.
body.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So anyway, when I got to that point, and I asked that why am I here, and it said music, I said, okay, well, what's the next part of that question I could ask, which is relative to music, what would I love to do the most?
Yeah.
And the answer was super obvious. I would love to share this music I'm so passionate with the world, because at that time you could at best hear it on National Public Radio or Pacifica at some obscure hour of the evening, and not enough people got exposure to it. But when you expose people to it, they go, wow, that's really beautiful,
Yeah.
it's lovely. So that just began a long, deep dive. I was introduced through a famous psychic at that time to a woman from Monaco who had been friends with King Hussein for 20 years. She had designed all of his palaces. She had a vision of doing a concert in Jordan to help facilitate peace in the Middle East between the Palestinians and the Israelis at that time. I was basically a political Neanderthal, and but yet I was just totally passionate about this music. And so this woman flew into Houston, where I was living at the time, and I met with her, and I said, look, if you're going to do a concert of this scale, size, and importance, it's imperative to have music that is about promoting inner peace, because without inner peace, you don't have outer peace.
Yeah.
And so I said, I was about as articulated as this. I said, I know that this music of Enya and Vangelis and Kitaro, it promotes inner peace. That much I knew. Yeah. So she said, I agree. And I said, look, I'm in corporate sales. Why don't you let me go out and enroll these musicians and help, add that element that as my contribution to fulfilling my life dream of helping to expose more people to this type of deep spiritual music. She said, okay. And I had donut contacts with these people. And the next thing I knew, however, through a friend that was part of the Pacifica radio station and a New Age station that he did, he was interviewing Kitaro on his first North American tour.
Oh, wow.
And I find myself, I'm backstage with Kitaro, interviewing Kitaro.
And synchronicities.
I was going to say, I love those. I love those synchronicities.
totally cool. And the next thing I knew, I take a job, I moved to Dallas, and I'm trying to get a connection with Yanni, who's in town trying to do his next album, Out of Silence. And I didn't have any connections to him, and my spirit just said, go there. And I did, and I was a vested representative of this concert. I stood in line and talked to he was signing autographs. I said, look, I'm doing this thing, et cetera, et cetera. And he goes, well, why don't you go over and talk to this guy? And this guy was the vice president of private music, the record label that he was on here, based here in Los Angeles. And so next thing I know, I'm having dinner with Yanni, and it was just sort of one after another. And then, after a period of time, this concert in the Middle East, due to a lot of geopolitical issues that were going on, collapsed. And I said, oh my God, what do I do? What do I do now?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
hopes and dreams. I mean, this is it. This is it.
And
you
Spirit
heard the
said,
call, you did it.
Yeah. And Spirit said, why not? Why don't you do a concert of just this particular type of music? So, long story short, I worked on this for literally 20 years. So many times I wanted to throw the towel in.
Yeah.
So many times, I was without money. Slept on people's couches. I ate bread at a coffee shop. I just did.
Do what you can.
You did what you had to do.
Whatever Spirit told me to do.
Yeah.
That was my agreement. I said, if you've given me the life mission, whatever you tell me to do, I am going to do it. Rain, sleet, hail, snow, I am doing it.
Yeah.
So, as a result of that, I was introduced through a dear friend Tyler Norris, who had originally ran John Denver Windstar organization, into connections in Palestine. And at this time, I'd never drawn a correlation between that and my original vision when I was a kid. So, we started going over there in 2009, and I took a broadcast producer over there with me. We met with, all of the executive leadership in the Palestinian government there to talk about this large-scale concert to bring peace to the Middle East. And in 2010, I took a surgical team as a first step to eye surgeon Dr. Paul Dougherty, just a super good soul.
Yeah.
And we delivered 40 free cataract surgeries in a 2-day period of time, $500,000
Wow.
worth of cataract surgeries for free for people who were blind and could not see in the city of Hebron. And so the next year, we were trying to pull off the event on 11/11/11, and I just couldn't pull it off. The Palestinian government had given us a letter in writing. They were going to give us $500,000 to produce the event, and I had talent lined up, and at the end, an Israeli incursion, forced all the money to go someplace else, and the money was gone. So
Wow.
anyway, in November, as a precursor, as a promotional precursor, my friend John Quigley and I, who does major aerial artwork around the world, we brought ultimately through him and another beautiful soul, Fritz, and we brought 1,000 Palestinian refugee children to the base of the Mount of Temptation in Jericho, where Jesus, stayed supposedly for 40 days and 40 nights, and we had him form the image of the Picasso peace dove and then spell the words, love all.
Oh, it's beautiful.
And then spell the word love in Arabic, and we filmed the image aerially, and it went around the world, and a year later the UN designated this as one of the 49 most iconic images in the history of the UN out of some 800,000 photos. And we didn't even know anything like that existed. But the following month, in December, that same year, 2011, I did a large-scale concert in Bethlehem, out to 80 million homes worldwide. We flew in the lead singer from the group Enigma, Fox Lima, and Gary Nicholson is a Grammy-winning Texas Hall of Fame singer-songwriter who's been a Yogananda devotee for 30 years. Yeah. And we brought in Hani Nasser and then Joanne Shenandoah, Grammy-winning Native American singer. And I threw the metaphysical kitchen sink at this thing. Yep. And Joanne reminded everybody right off the bat how Native Americans think 7 generations ahead about how we treat resources and such. Yeah. And Peter Joseph, who did the film Zeitgeist, one of the most amazing films ever produced, we shot a 5-minute promotional spot for this that showed how Jesus and Buddha and Krishna, Muhammad, basically all saying the same:
all the same thing.
Be loving. Yeah. And to the larger degree, and in a brief summation of what I've learned from this journey, is that I really believe every monstrous and horrible thing on the planet to date is basically occurring because people are literally doing what Jesus said in his quote, "Love thy neighbor as thyself." And that's the whole problem. We are loving our neighbors. Yeah. Exactly how we love ourselves, and that is where we don't love ourselves with kindness and care and compassion. And if I don't love me, the best I could do is project my craziness onto you, or onto the animals, or onto Mother Earth. So this is an inner job that is is imperative to occur, because when I first heard that quote, "Love thy neighbor as thyself," as a young child, I said, that is the absolute axiom of truth. That is the truth. And then as I grew older and I began to observe, our planet, as insane as it seems to be, my friend Casey Kasem, before he died, and he called it, it's an insane asylum for the rest of the universe. Yeah. I said, that's a tremendously insightful perspective. And so that's what we're really doing with music. If you look at all the major spiritual texts on the planet, beginning with the Upanishads means the last song. The Bhagavad Gita, 3,000 years older than the Bible, means song celestial, or song of the Lord. And in the Bible, the word means primary harmony. The first bone to develop in the fetus is the ear bone. The first sense to develop in the fetus is hearing. The last sense to go when you die is hearing. Music is the only art form where the right and left hemispheres of the brain work simultaneously. And MIT has shown through PET scans that the pineal gland, or what mystics call the third eye, this is the area of the brain that processes music. This whole thing is done through sound, and this is what the top quantum physicists say as well. So the essence of what we're doing with these large global concerts, and what I'm ultimately leading up to, which I can talk about further, is certain musicians, I believe, because of their spiritual practice and their devotion, they can tune into what Pythagoras will call the music of the spheres. In this film, Copying Beethoven, the actor Ed Harris plays Beethoven, and it's about the relationship he has with a woman who's scribing his music, hence the name Copying Beethoven. And in the film, he's a highly dismissive and abusive human being to this very wonderful lady who's just trying to help him scribe his music.
Yeah.
And then one day, out of shame and guilt, while they're alone, he slams his hand down on the table. He says, "What's the deal? Why do you take this from me? Stand up for yourself." And she starts to weep. And she says, "I do this because I hope by being in your presence, one day I might be able to write great music like you." And her words so sincerely move him that he sits with her at the table like this, eye to eye for the first time, to share with her the intimacy and the volition through which this music is occurring through him. And so he says these words, which are basically the philosophical axiom of what I have looked for all my life in music. He says, "The vibrations on the ear are the breath of God speaking to man's soul." Music is the language of God. We musicians are as close to God as man can be. We hear his voice, we read his lips, and we give birth to the children of God who sing his praise. That is what musicians are. And he says, if we are not that, then we are nothing. And that's why I believe these great musicians, as you may know, Beethoven, Bach, Chopin, and Mozart, they would write at the top of their compositions the Latin initials AMDG, Ad Mortium, De Gloriam, for the greater glory of God. So again, my belief is that there are certain musicians, because of their spiritual practice and their devotion, they can tune into what Pythagoras would call the music of the spheres. These are a series of frequencies and harmonics analogous to what the industrial psychologist Maslow would have called a state of self-actualization, or what certain spiritual teachers like Yogananda or etc. would call a state of self-realization. So in other words, these would be thoughts like love, compassion, forgiveness, empathy, these higher orders of thinking, which moves consciousness out of a linear and dualistic right, wrong, good, bad view of the world, and it moves consciousness into a holographic perspective of seeing how everything is lovingly and divinely interconnected. I believe the soul already operates on this core frequency. Music of the spheres, Om, Amen, Buddha, Muhammad, Krishna, Christ consciousness, whatever you want to call it semantically, all the same thing. So in other words, when somebody experiences this music physiologically through the ears and intuitively through the psyche, it's literally as though two computers are talking the same protocol. The law of physics, called the law of sympathetic vibration, dictates the consciousness of the listener will have to resonate correspondingly. So the idea behind what we're doing in these global concerts for peace, and what we'll talk about later, is if we broadcast sacred music, sacred musical prayers for peace, where every note and every lyric and every composition is curated from a perspective of giving someone a visceral goosebump experience of their own innate divinity, and we broadcast this from key sacred sites on the planet, which we all know weren't built there by coincidence. These are amplifier stations. They're vortexes, whatever you want to call them. If we reach a massive audience of 100 million or 1 billion or more people, it is possible, I believe, as Dr. Rupert Sheldrake says, to shift the morphogenetic field, or create, as Malcolm Gladwell would call it, this tipping point in consciousness, or create this 100th monkey effect. So that's the essence of what we're really looking to do through these events, is give people this opportunity to be still again, and to begin to ask these deeper inner questions. You know, why am I here? What is my purpose? What can I do to create a world of greater love and peace? And
that is so beautiful. Gail and I took yoga teacher training in 2018, and that not only the breath, but the vibration of the sound, closing a class with an Om, and the vibration of that sound, feeling that in your body, and then Om being just the very essence and the nature of the divine. Even as the sound comes through, the sound giving matter, giving form to it. Talk a little bit about sound and how everything is vibration.
Well, I think in the most important book there is on the subject by Hazrat Inayat Khan, called The Mysticism of Sound and Music, he states implicitly, he says, people say that the soul, on hearing the song of creation, entered the body. But in reality, he says, the soul itself was the song. Then he goes on to say, there is no greater way to attain spiritual enlightenment and or awareness than through music, if only the music is rightly understood. So I've spent 30 years of my life looking for these musicians who I believe rightly understand this music of the sphere, this music that gives you goosebumps, this music that creates a tearful moment of realization.
Yeah.
And
Or transformation.
of course, and when that see, how do you believe this works? I mean, let's talk the reality of physics here. I mean, you start as a single cell, you divide into this very complicated organism, and this is quite frankly, this is not magic. This is cymatics. So the DNA of the body basically acts as a blueprint or the Akashic records of where each person has evolved to in this particular time and space coordinate. Yeah. The Om, Amen, Buddha, Muhammad, Krishna, Christ, whatever you call it, frequency goes into the DNA, it fractures it into the respective bandwidths where we believe we're separate from the divinity of the I Am we already are. Right? And the goal is to become cognizant of where these fractured states of awareness are, these fearful clutchings, or as the Maya veil, or as Buddha would say, your attachments cause your suffering, to become conscious of where these fractured states are and consciously collapse these bandwidths again so that we are in atonement. So look, if you were to take as an example, white light, run it through a prism, it fractures it into the various spectrum. But if you take that same fractured light and run it back through the prism, you have singularity, you have atonement, you have white light. Yeah. And that's the goal of this whole experiment on planet Earth. We're here to become aware of where we're fractured and learn that, as the Jesus figure said, greater things I have done. Yeah. Yeah. Even the least among you can do greater than I. Right. I mean, how else do you interpret this other than I did it, and you can do it, and you can go further than I. However, you must first, as he says, find the kingdom of heaven, which dwelleth where? Within. Within. And he says you cannot enter this kingdom of heaven until, metaphorically, you become as a child. Yeah. So only in that state of innocence, if you will, can you, as it says in Psalms, be still and know that I am God. Mm-hmm. Only then can you know, and God said, let there be light. Yeah. And that the Word was made flesh and full of grace and dwelt among us. This is why Einstein states energy and matter are different forms of the same thing. Mm-hmm. So we are co-creating all the time, nanosecond after nanosecond. And this comes back to, a more important reality of how we are, in fact, co-creating everything all the time. Yeah. Yes. So I believe, we've, at the end of this Mayan calendar, I believe we transitioned from, a state of operating from the persona, which in Latin means to pump air through your mask, into becoming the heretic. Now, if you ask most people, what do you think, is the word heretic a good word or bad word? Most people say, well, it's a negative word. It means you're a crazy person. No, this is exactly the opposite of what's true. The word heretic comes from Latin, and the word heretic means the person who knows that they can choose, right? So that's why the Christ and many of the enlightened teachers on the planet were called the heretic, because they weren't choosing from the external data being presented from the authority figures. They were choosing from the within, the voice within, the small, still voice within, right? So if you look in a book I've written called The Power of Choice, Success in Your Life Purpose, and some videos that I have online that are available for people to watch, it's imperative, I believe, in order to really embrace the consciousness of the heretic and to really truly understand that, I mean, as you look around the room, any audience member, if you look around the room, single thing you see in the room, with the exception of plants or animals or other people, was just a thought in someone's imagination. Yeah. I mean, this is not magic. Yes. So if you look back at the story of Aladdin's lamp, right? In Aladdin's lamp, the mystic, evil mystic, sent the young boy on a journey to get this lamp that was hidden behind a special cave door. And in order to get the cave door, he had to say 3 words to open up the cave door. And the 3 words were, open sesame, right? Now say that slowly.
Open sesame.
Exactly right. Open sesame. Wow. Right?
Yeah. Because it's within us.
Yeah.
Yes.
It is. So every word is made of letters, right? Mm-hmm. Every letter has its own specific phonetic sound based on whether it's a consonant or a vowel sound. Every time we say a word, any word whatsoever, it's really analogous to hitting several keys on a piano simultaneously. We're sitting on a chord of causation. most words that people use, as they're looking to co-create some future possibility, they'll say, I need to do that, or I should do that, or I must do that, or I have to do that. So I ask you, is the word need closer to a state of abundance or lack? Which would you, of course. If something's closer to lack, is lack closer to a state of love or fear?
Fear.
Sure. If something's closer to fear, is fear closer to a state of responding or reacting?
Reacting.
Of course. So it means that anytime you think the word need, that is a certain frequency of causation. You're pulling people, situation, and circumstances into form. When you speak the word need, you're accelerating that mass into form. When you write it down, you're concretizing that, right? So co-creating from words like that are fundamentally based in fear, lack, and reaction, like need, should, have to, must, very different from co-creating from words on the other side of what we'll call the hero's journey bridge, where we're co-creating from a state of what I really do want to create. I choose, I will, I want, I desire. You could even say that's required. So let me explain what I mean by the hero's journey. In the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell brilliantly talks about the hero leaving the village of conformity. They're in pursuit of slaying the dragon, getting the grail, whatever it is. But they leave, they have the courage to leave, and then they're put through a lot of tests to prove the character of their worth.
The separation into the initiation.
Into realizing their dream. So ultimately, they go through all these tests until they get to the grand last test. And the grand last test is called the bridge of no return. And the real hero crosses that bridge of no return, and when they get to the other side, what do you think they might do to the bridge? They burn it to the ground.
So there's no way to go back.
That's exactly right. And so what we're talking about is reconfiguring consciousness to co-create from what we really do want without even a foreshadowing thought of what we didn't want in the past. Because if we say, I don't want that, the universe goes, perfect, let me show you some more of that. Right? And if you say you want this, the universe goes, well, let me show you more of that. And so getting really clear about what we really do want as opposed to what we don't want, and only articulating what it is we do want, creates an entirely different matrix, if you will, from the law of the from the law of attraction, if you will. And this is a real important shift in uplifting consciousness for us to begin, if you will, from Einstein's perspective. When he would come home from school, his mom never said, did you make good grades? She said, did you ask good questions? When we begin to ask these good questions of ourselves, what do I really want to achieve? What would I really like to have? Most people start out, I would say, in regards to a relationship with a person or with a business, they'll say, well, I don't want to be with someone that's a jerk and cheats on me, or I want to be people that treat me fairly and pay me well, blah, blah, blah. And the universe goes, perfect, we're just going to show you another person with the same face and same, and that's the matrix you get. However,
it's easy for people to know what they don't want more than what they do want.
It is an important starting place. And I wrote an article. This is an article within the context of the book, The Power of Choice: Success in Your Life Purpose. So, but that's just a sort of a baby step. The no is a baby step in ultimately getting past that into becoming completely clear about what it is you want. I want to be in relationship with a woman who's kind and loving and caring and compassionate and generous and I'm attracted to, and et cetera. I want to be in a job with people who are kind and loving and value my creativity and pay me enormously well. Right? And that you create a completely different matrix. And you can also say, well, I want to create more money. Right? Well, you finding a penny on the street answers that prayer, doesn't it?
Right? More money.
So the more clear you declare what it is you want, and by when, the universe just goes, got it, we got it, Look ahead, keep looking ahead, and let us take care of that next step. Because, in the Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade film, where India's trying to get to the Grail, as you may recall, and the Germans have stolen the Grail from him. They beat him to the place where the cave is, where the Grail is to be found, and Indy and them finally arrive, and they're watching the German soldiers being sent by their commander one after another into basically a booby-trapped cave, where they come back dead.
Yeah.
And so India's discovered. They bring him down. They say, "Hey, you're going. You're. I mean, he's just watched all these people die trying to
Yeah.
get through there." And he goes, "You're going." And he says, "You're out of your mind. I'm not going." And so the German commander takes the gun and shoots his dad, Sean Connery, in the stomach. He says, "You're going, because if he doesn't drink out of that grail, he's going to die."
Oh boy.
So he's forced to go on the hero's journey. So
Yeah.
the German commander gives the map back to him, and he makes it through the blades that try to cut his head off, and through floors that fall away, where if he doesn't step on the words of God correctly, he's impaled by spears. And then he gets to the end of this cave, and at the end it's just a sheer drop off.
Yeah.
Thousands of feet down, 100 feet across. He can see the cave where the grail is. He has no way to swing across, no way to jump across, and they're yelling, "Hindi, you have to hurry. Your father's dying." He stands on the precipice of this cliff that looks like imminent death. And he decides, by looking at the map, he sees a man clearly walking in midair to the other side. And he concludes, the only thing I can do is take this leap of faith. It's the only option.
Yeah.
So you can see in his face, part terror and part utter conviction.
Yeah.
And as he lifts his leg up to step it out over, it comes down, and he steps down on an illusionary bridge that you could not have seen if you had first not had the courage to take that leap of faith. I suggest to you that life is this way, always. It's always offering you a leap of faith. Make that next phone call. Write your idea down.
Yeah.
Take it to this person that you know. And, the ego is, as we know, very clever in sabotaging every single step that it can. You don't want to do that's a good idea, but why don't you do that tomorrow?
That personal protector.
Another day.
Yeah, another day. Or, who are you to think you could do something like this? So, I come back full circle to this experience I told you about when I was a little kid.
Yep.
Right? So that year, the first event we did was called Love All, with the Palestinian kids at the base of the Mount of Temptation.
Yeah.
Then the next year in 2012, we brought several hundred Palestinian Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts to the dividing wall in Bethlehem. And by the way, there's a 30-foot prison wall built around Palestine. Most people don't know this, but that's the reality.
Wow.
And we had the kids put their paint-covered hands on the dividing wall to create a visual plea to bring that wall down, and we had the rest of the kids spell the words "Free All."
Nice.
Yeah.
And then the following year, in that same year, we were also going to do, what I was ultimately trying to do was bring Palestinians and Israelis to opposite sides of the wall and create a bridge.
Yeah.
We couldn't pull that off. So in addition to that event we did with the kids with their hands on the wall, we decided we were going to do a large peace symbol in the middle of Major Square. And so in order to draw this large peace symbol, you take a piece of string and you walk it out like 40 feet, and you walk a piece of chalk, to make a circle to start the peace symbol. I happened to be at the center of the string. And it turns out, as I looked up, that was the exact place I saw when I was a little boy at age 8, free falling into Bethlehem.
Wow.
And
So your soul is on that journey, and you actually had the opportunity to witness what your purpose was, even at that young age. Then.
indeed.
You had a total psychic hit.
And I think most people have these insights along the way. And when you have the courage to live your life where you know that the only thing that's limiting you is you, and you can have the courage to take that leap of faith, regardless of how
how hard it is.
scary it can
it
be.
is,
It's
Because
scary.
I can tell you, I've gone through stuff.
Yeah.
And I spent 20 years working on that first concert.
Yeah.
And many times I was going to throw the towel in. I just say, there's no way I can pull this off. And I just kept taking the leap of faith. Even on the very last day after we prepped, we flew in all the musicians. And the main guy that was going to help us produce the concert there, who had all the connections and et cetera, he says, we're out. Unless you write us a check for $16,000 right now, we're out.
Wow.
So the guy that was hosting us at the hotel, very well man of good means, I told him, and he said,
Wow.
Don't you worry about it.
Wow.
So we got there, and we got to the venue, this beautiful venue at the Bethlehem Convention Palace. My friend George Bassus, managed and was the architect and built it. Everything failed.
Oh.
The broadcast truck we had coming in from Israel was 6 hours late. The projector that we were going to be using, for the event, it failed. We didn't have time to do rehearsal. Everything that the MC that we were bringing in from Jordan was being held up by the Israelis at checkpoint for hours, and they wouldn't let her through. We couldn't find out how, and just everything in the world that you could possibly imagine went south. And the only thing I could do is, you haven't brought me this far to fail.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
I'm doing your
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm doing your prayer.
Yeah.
So the event came off great, beautifully.
Yeah.
Almost without a
You're in that place
without an edge.
of submission and flow.
Oh, yeah.
And let it go. I love the maya, the illusion that we're in. And I even more than that, I love the lila, the game.
Yeah.
Talk to that point, this whole experience,
The divine dance.
the thing you're doing, the dance.
It is I've pondered this question most of my life. I grew up in corporate sales. I learned tenacity and complete laser focus. And at the same time, how do you hold that level of tenacity and that level of clarity and that level of intent, and at the same time, surrender? As you can see, the event that we were ultimately trying to do in Bethlehem originally got moved to this other location. We didn't even know that was going to occur. And it was a beautiful image that really touched people because, we had the peace symbol. We had Palestinian Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts I worked with for 2 weeks to get there. And then all of a sudden at this event where the Church of the Patriarch was there, it was like it's the biggest, it's bigger than Christmas Day, Christmas Eve.
Wow.
They were out. They weren't going to participate. Wow. I said, heck with this, man. I started pulling bicycle gates in place, and I said, we're doing this thing. I got crowds of all kinds of kids. We're going to pull these kids over there. They're going to be part of this thing. And then we started to chalk it out, and all of a sudden, they're back in. So we pulled them and Muslim kids, because in Bethlehem, you have the Church of Nativity, where Jesus is born on one side of the one side of the square, and on the other side, you have a mosque.
Yeah.
Right? Complete.
You've got the three major world religions right there.
Yeah.
Right there. And so, that was one of the, I think this is one of the primary reasons I was guided to do this work there. This is the birthplace of the three major monotheistic religions. This is the birthplace of the crazy paradigm. I have the right God, so you don't. So that makes me good and you bad. And if I'm good and you're bad, I must be righteous and you got to be evil. And once I have you at evil, I can go into your village and murder men, rape women, kill babies, burn village down, and go home and sleep like a baby because God said it was okay.
Because you're doing
Feel
God's
justified.
will. They're the other.
Yeah, they're the others, and that's the whole thing. See, when we find ourselves, when we find the kingdom of heaven within,
Yeah.
I only see you as my brother. I only see you as my sister.
Yeah.
I only see the animals as something that I am here to hold reverence and caretake over, and Mother Earth.
Yeah.
And then we see, as Chief Seattle wisely said, all things are connected, and that's what music can most specifically do. Confucius, even as far back as his time, he said, if one desires to know whether a kingdom is well governed, and if its morals are good or bad, the quality of the music furnishes the answer. So again, the Sufi master Hazrat Inayat Khan in his book says, of all the art, of all the arts, this is really the perfect art.
Yeah.
I think that I'm just blown away by that story, because what stood out to me is everything going wrong. You walk away so humbled, knowing that it wasn't you that caused that to happen.
Yeah,
It's just, there's no way. It was divine.
indeed.
That's beautiful.
I think that's the beauty of what you're pointing out, is that, when we have enough courage to be, from the Bible perspective, it says, he who exalts himself is abased, and he who humbles himself is exalted.
Yeah.
When you're in that place of innocence, the Maya falls away.
Yeah.
And then you see the reality of the miracle that's always there.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of each person empowering themselves to take this hero's journey. Whatever it is you're doing right now in your life, whatever you feel isn't working the way you will, write it out as you would like to see it, the best way you possibly can, without I don't want this or I don't want that. Write out everything you want to see in a job, in a relationship, in your life, in the house, whatever it is you want to create in your life. And I promise the universe will deliver that, as long as you keep an unwavering faith of that just being so. And so that is, the larger context of this. The ego works from, have, do, be.
Yeah.
The higher self works from be, do, have.
Yeah.
Right? And the more we be the state of, as the Christ said, greater things I have done, even the least among you can do greater than I.
Yeah.
Live your dream.
That's good. Languaging is so important.
It's imperative.
So
It
for,
really is.
for that space of writing your intention, writing down that thing you want, what is the languaging that I want to have when I'm saying
I choose.
want something? You say I choose.
I choose.
'Cause I don't want to have that space of lack. I want to have
Yeah.
that space of I already have it.
I choose. I will. I want. That's required. See, and this can be also a very important perspective to learn how to engage with people in a business perspective. So let me just use it as an example with you, Gail, if I can say. So,
Yeah.
Gail, say, Steve, your shirt is blue.
Steve, your shirt is blue.
No, I agree with you.
Okay.
Did you get that? Say it again. You didn't get it.
Steve, your shirt is blue.
No, I agree with you.
Okay, I caught it that time.
Got it.
You said no.
So ask me, David, Steve, would you like to go to the movies with me?
Steve, would you like to go to the movies?
No, I'd love to do that.
Okay. Well, you said no, and
Right.
you said you'd love
So
to do
what do
it.
you think the probability of me showing up with you would be?
No, not.
Pretty much not.
Yeah.
Right. Because I'm sabotaging the conversation. And this is a tell. In a card game, this would be called a tell. See, if I said yes, I'd love to go to the movies with you, you could pretty much bank I'm going to show up.
Now we're
And
going
the
to
same
make
will-
plans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the same, is true. What you reap, you sow. What you sow, you reap. Right. So if I'm using if I'm being out of integrity, or I'm, if you will, incongruent versus congruent, yes, I agree with you. That's congruent. No, I don't agree with you. That's still congruent, right? But if I say, no, I agree with you, that's incongruent. And this is so really fundamentally basic, but this is really at the subcontext of how our consciousness is operating. And that's what we're calling into form. And the more we choose and have clarity about what it is we really do want to create, and stay in an affirmed de facto conversation with that in both what we write and what we speak, then the universe only can agree with us, right?
Yep.
And drawing these things into form.
So you're putting that in the context of I don't have this. So I have a want.
So
or a
the
lack.
universe says, guess what? We're going to show you more I don't have.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if you get clear about what it is on the other side of that don't want, into framing that from a perspective of what you already have or what you do want to create, the universe goes, perfect, we'll show you that as well.
There we go.
So this takes, this does take a little bit of courage, because the ego says, well, look, Gail, that's a really nice idea you have. But look, you grew up poor, or you grew up like this, and who do you think you are to have a relationship that's kind and loving, etc.?
Right.
Because you have a lot of evidence to show that the world doesn't treat you this
doesn't
way,
act
right?
that way, right?
And on some level you go, wow, well, thanks for the dysfunctional shoulder, holding my shoulder and drowning me while you preclude me from really, proclaiming what it is I really do want in my heart, regardless of what I've had in the past. Because see, the ego, as we all know, it only works from two vectors. It works from the past, or the future, and it projects the past into the future. It's never in the now. The now is only reserved for God and the divine and the spoken
present.
word.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And so this is a really important, perspective to have in regards to paying very close attention to what words populate into our mind. Is that word projecting something into the future, or is it speaking about the now, or am I still attached to the past? Right. In Alex Huxley's book Island, it's about a group of enlightened people who left the mainland and decided to move to an island because they thought there would be less distractions and they could stay in the enlightened frequency.
Right.
They get to the island and there are still lots of distraction there, and so they gather and they say, well, how do we stay in the enlightened state? And someone observed that the island was full of thousands upon parrots, and they concluded they were going to teach the parrots 2 words, which they knew the parrots would repeat 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and if they were listening to those words, they would stay in the enlightened frequency. And it turns out the 2 words were pay attention.
Pay attention. I wasn't expecting that one.
Yeah. So when we're paying attention, we're not in the future.
Right.
We're not in the past. We are here.
Yeah.
We're here, and we're here
we're
and
present.
now. And the goal is to really be here and now with ourselves, present to what words are populating into our mind.
Yeah.
So I'll give you the shortcut summary of what this really boils down to. The ego mind can only use words of fear, lack, and reaction. That's it. It's its vocabulary.
Yeah.
Period. The end. It cannot use ever, never, under any circumstances, it cannot use words of love or the present moment or empowerment. It can't use words of choice. I choose, I will, I want. That's required. And if you can still your mind to witness and pay attention closely to these words which are populating into your head. You're at a street corner, you're at a stop sign, it says, you need to go right. Go left. But if it says going right will help you and benefit you, then you'll find that you'll avoid some accident or something like that. So it's a very subtle level of communication. These thoughts are going off all the time, nanosecond after nanosecond. And the more closely we pay attention to these words which are populating into our mind and discern them from a perspective of, are these words of fear, lack, and reaction, or are these words about empowerment, the present moment, and choice?
Yeah.
Then we get completely different outcomes. And if we do that on an individual level and on a collective level, endless possibilities
That part
are
of
possible.
the collective, I think that's something that is the most important thing that I have learned on my spiritual journey, is it's part of the whole, because it is this one thinging itself, and we've individuated ourselves. And so now, instead of being separate from the divine, I am part of the divine having the human experience.
Yeah.
And that took me the yogic path to understand that's the true self. I was like, oh, and then the light bulb clicks on. And so now you and me are not enemies trying to somehow compete for a resource. We're now co-creative partners on how we can, what is it that we can do together?
Exactly. The Buddhist poet Thich Nhat Hanh says the healing of the self is the healing of the nation.
Oh, beautiful.
Right?
Yeah.
It is.
So if we can bring healing to ourselves, and we can become conscious gardeners, and every time a weed tries to populate into our mind, you can't do that, or you should do that, or your dad said you couldn't do this, and etc. And we don't pull the weed off from the top, but we really pull the weed up, root and all.
Yeah.
Then we can plant. We're given an opportunity to plant something new, because the Buddhists say in order for you to be whole, you must first be empty. The universe will not pour into your cup if it's already full of I can't, or I shouldn't, or whatever. The universe is waiting for your cup to be a whole and holy vessel, right? For that idea of possibility to show up. I live my life by the creed of Richard Bach's book, Jonathan Livingston Seagull, where he says, you're never given a dream without also being given the power to make it come true.
The power to
That's
make it
good.
come true.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when we believe in that part of ourself, I do have the power to make my dream come true, whatever it would be, to be the best at this etc. That's where it starts. It
You
starts
visualize
with just
it,
a
you
thought.
perceive it,
Yeah.
and you have that ability to
Yeah,
achieve
you
it.
continually hold an unwavering focus on the reality of that being so, and your conversation is, I choose to be this, I will accomplish this, this is already done, etc. versus, the other vocabulary, which creates a completely
Yeah.
different, reality.
So there's going to be people out there going, yeah, but Steve, you don't know my circumstances. What do you say to that person?
Well, but invalidates.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but. How about yes and?
Yes, and
Yes, and that's one of the best lessons we've learned is you
Yeah.
can have that and you can
Right.
continue on into the next paradigm.
I remember when I was first learning the lessons of the nts, when I was writing the can'ts, I just went back and started crossing out all the nts, all the nots,
Yeah.
until I could really see it turn around, and then I could write it in a good flow. But I remember going through like this time period when I was younger where it was like the cool thing to say the opposite thing of what you wanted. Because if you said the opposite, you'd get what you wanted. Right? That was like the worst thing in the world
Murphy's
that could
Law
happen
version
to
of
our
it.
society
Yeah.
because it trained us wrong.
Well, there are there
it's-
are nefarious entities at work within the communication systems which promote things from what the Germans would call the term Schadenfeld, which means to take pleasure from other people's suffering. And the major suffering they want is for us to suffer, not suffer, not really knowing how powerful we are as human beings. Because once we know how powerful we are as human beings and the co-creative possibilities that we have, we're unstoppable.
Yeah.
And there are certain entities that want to put a bit and bridle on us and hold us back from fulfilling whatever it is we do. Sometimes our parents do this unconsciously. They don't want to see you get hurt. So I don't know. Do you really think you could be a doctor and and so on and so forth?
Brilliant. My mom wanted me to be a doctor so I could have a material wealth. And I went to college and I was like, oh, I got a degree in biology. Man, did I hate doing all that stuff.
Yeah.
I wanted to be creative. And I wish we would have gotten business degrees or done something in music composition,
We used to laugh at business people, and that's all we do now.
Yeah.
All we do is business stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I started out in a business trajectory. My dad was a nuclear physicist. He ran the aerospace program for TRW in Cape Canaveral. He bored a hole in the Yucca Mountain sites where they're purporting to store nuclear waste in stainless steel glass lined drums. Did a lot of really amazing things. And yet he and I had a really challenging time in conversing about my role in working up the corporate ladder versus this tangential dream I had of producing a concert. And so in the very first step towards that realization, I produced a video with a lot of the very who's who in the consciousness movement before they actually popped onto the cover of Time or Newsweek's. Dean Ornish, Gary Zukov, Barbara DeAngelis, Casey Kasem, Ed Asner, Martin Sheen.
I saw Deepak's name on there too.
Deepak, etc. All these people weren't really, they weren't known in the mainstream, but I had enough inner vision to see, the importance and congruency between the common message each of these were talking about. John Robbins, who was talking about the environment, and how all of them were basically talking about the same thing: self-esteem and or really self-love. Self-love is a foundation to understand how we're connected into an ecosystem where everything is connected. We're not separate from anything. There is no other.
That's right.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest lessons I have learned, again, I've done ayahuasca ceremony, and the madre says to me, the highest form of worship, David, is to enjoy yourself and to love and appreciate and accept yourself. And I'm like, oh, well, what do you mean? Aren't we supposed to prefer other people over ourselves? She said, you need to connect with who you are, your true self, and enjoy your ride, enjoy this human experience. That's why you came here. And I was like, wow, that's that profound shift that people need to go. Like you opened up. If I love you the way I love myself, maybe you're not being loved right because I'm not
Yeah.
loving myself in this context of modern day society.
Yeah.
Get back to that foundation of who you are. Love and accept yourself, and then you're out from that abundance. You're able to love and accept others.
Yeah, the Course in Miracles, I think one of, is a book I've gone through
Yeah.
for a long time in my life.
Yeah.
And the Course in Miracles says the salvation of the world depends on you.
Yes.
It depends on you.
Yes.
It depends on each of us waking up.
Yeah.
And if we do that, then again, we're only going to see how I'm connected with everything, and everything is connected with me. And we understand the greater harmony of how our life can really deliver to us our greatest dreams come true.
Yeah.
And when we do, and if we're pointing our question towards that within the context of how can I make a contribution to leaving behind a legacy of a world that's, more kind and more loving and more caring and more compassionate and it honors all the sentient beings from the ant up. Then we're going to have a world that is really peace. Where there is really, it's heaven on earth.
Yeah,
and,
we're functioning as one.
Yeah, and that becomes from people finding peace within.
So what are the things that you are doing now? What's the next Robertson thing that's happening? Is it the concerts? Is it the putting things in motion?
Yeah, well, my beloved Hope and I are working on a release of an app, which is a very famous gong healer has created. It's called Third Ear.
Oh.
And he's a very famous gong specialist.
We love gong.
Yeah,
and sound bowl.
Yeah,
and
sound healing.
so this app will be free to the world, and it'll be free to all veterans and all active duty combat soldiers and all refugees around the world. It'll be a sound healing app for that'll have gong bowls, guided meditations with Jack Cornfield, and inspirational healing music,
Nice.
just as a means to help veterans specifically process through PTSD and or their families and or have just a good night's sleep. And that's one of the things that's coming up next. That'll happen in September, and then
Healing trauma.
healing trauma. And then we're working towards a large-scale concert similar to what I've produced so far called Evolving Planet 7, which will basically be broadcasting sacred music from several sacred sites on the planet, raising money like Live Aid, using the money to fund towards NGOs which are already working in these silos of concern, and using the event as a global annual report to show humanity,
Where are we at?
where are we at? I mean, these things aren't, animal rights aren't disconnected from human rights and et cetera, and environmental issues. This is an ecosystem, and it's important to address all of these issues in a very pragmatic way. So it'll be a 7-year campaign focused on the 7 most important issues impacting humanity and the environment, to impact, as from a Native American perspective, 7 generations ahead.
Give some websites. I know you've got many.
ProjectPeaceOnEarth.org, ProjectPeaceOnEarth.org, Peace Song Awards, and support Veterans Now. And, for musicians who are out there that may be watching this that have a great song with a message of peace, instrumental or lyrical or otherwise, we have an annual Peace Song Awards contest where we're awarding grand prizes to musicians who are creating the most inspirational music to help promote the message of peace in pretty much every genre of music, from new age to opera to classical to folk to country, etc. We're just looking to re-inspire musicians. I'm 62, and a lot of the music I grew up with in the late 60s and early 70s was about peace. How do you create a world of peace?
Yeah.
And a lot of the music is diverted off that path, due to a lot of the commercial nature of it. And just really believe it's important, as Voltaire said, to remember that music is the pathway to the heart.
Yeah.
And if we have musicians who are, writing music that is lyrically and instrumentally, compositionally relevant towards helping people find inner peace, then we will experience a world of greater love and peace.
Yeah.
And music, to me, is so important because when you're stuck in an emotion, music is one of the things that can easily pull you out of that emotion.
Yeah.
And so that's the importance of that.
It is, both individually and collectively.
Mm-hmm.
You know, look at Live Aid. Live Aid reached 1.5 billion people. I had most of the people who did, you know, the production and broadcast, you know, on that, and that, you know, that event affected 1 billion or more people.
Yeah, pre-internet, pre-cell phones.
Yeah, pre-internet.
Right.
So
It's incredible.
imagine if we're doing an event really, you know, that's utilizing the most consciously, spiritually conscious music we possibly can broadcast from these sacred sites, which are our amplifier stations, and how that could potentially shift morphogenetic field.
Yeah.
And that's the goal that we're really working towards.
Yeah. So
Powerful.
for the viewer, for the listener, what are some things of action that people can put into place to help support what you're working on?
They can go to our site if they wish. They can make a donation if they wanted to, little or large, whatever they want. I've funded most of all this stuff myself, and a lot of these ideas were just so far-reaching. People said, "Well, you know, that's a good idea. I'm really proud to support that." But you know, they're always there for the finish line photo, but you know, they're not there to put an oar in the water.
They've got their arm around you at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. They want the photo.
Wow.
They want the photo op.
Wow.
So, I mean, ultimately, what we're doing with this, you know, this next large series of concerts is to provide every person an opportunity to be a caretaker, a vested caretaker, and create a legacy, you know, for themselves and their family.
Yeah.
Why? Well, I mean, I used to grow up naively thinking that the people who were smart running the government had this stuff under control, and
Yes.
they don't.
Yeah.
They really don't.
Yeah.
And the more we understand that, you know, it's not going to be some Christ figure or some other enlightened person that pops down on the planet and gives everybody the roadmap to get there. The roadmap is within each of us, and it's about each of us, you know, raising that up to our conscious awareness and having the courage and volition to take that leap of faith every single day we can, every single moment we can, and watch the miracles show up.
Yeah.
And then you get, you know, you have one miracle show up, you become bulletproof. I was, man.
Yeah.
When you see these things happen like that, you say, wow. I mean, after I did the first concert, I worked on this for 20 years. I mean, so many times I was about to like, thank you so much for the opportunity to do this. I don't know if I could pull this off.
Yeah. I imagine I just felt crushing, just the weight of it. Yeah.
It was. But then when I pulled that first event off, I swear I felt like man walked on the moon.
You
It's
were
like
flying.
you get to realize how powerful your intent combined with the divinity of God's love, the mountains.
Yeah.
That's the juiciness of life.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
That's the part I live for every day. And hope this is going to help.
Oh, so good.
So good.
Steve, when as we close,
Sure.
we like the guest to kind of give presence to, if there's one thing I want people to take away from my message today, it's this. So what would that be for you?
Understand the kingdom of heaven. You know, it's within you. It's in all of us.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
And remember, you know, the salvation of the world depends on each of us waking up.
That's so good. I was taught to wait for the second coming of Jesus.
Yeah,
And now
was
I'm
too,
realizing that the second coming of Jesus, the second coming of the Christ consciousness is all of us waking up and coming together.
The greater consciousness is, greater things I have done.
Yeah.
Even the least among you can do greater than I.
things
How do you
than I.
walk away from that statement other than, you know, I did it and you can do it and you can go further than I.
Yeah.
And if each person wakes up into that reality, regardless of the situation or circumstances you've grown up in or have adopted to, whatever it is, you can create a miracle
Yeah.
in your life.
Yeah.
You can. You can and you will. Because if I did what I've done, all I did was with a prayer. I had little money and just prayers. I just asked people with complete, utter authenticity and sincerity, would you help? Would you do this? And you can't believe
Yeah.
So
You
beautiful.
just
How
have to
generous
ask.
people are,
Yeah.
you know, and how beautiful people are, you know, and they'll recognize you. They'll see the authenticity in who you are, and they'll want to support that because people want to see people win.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Steve, thanks for being a
Thank
part
you.
of Contribution to Consciousness and bringing people
Sure.
together. Thank you for the work you're doing on the world.
Thank you.
We honor your journey, and
Oh,
to
thank
you,
you.
we say namaste. my friend.
Yeah,
Namaste.
namaste, yeah.
Thanks for joining us here on Exploring the Human Journey. You can find us as a video on YouTube or listen to us as a podcast. You can also join in the conversation by following us on Facebook and Instagram. For more information, go to the website at exploringthehumanjourney.com.